Well, great. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be showing off this panel today on CouchCon. I'm really excited to be here on CouchCon. My name is Randy Knapp. I'm the creator of ZAFIR tactical role-playing game. And today we're going to be talking about using code, automation, and a variety of other tools to help in making uh, your tabletop role-playing games and a variety of content for tabletop role-playing games. So we're going to kick it off right away. This presentation is about probably 45 minutes long. For the first half or so, I'll be doing a walkthrough of a variety of techniques and some examples from ZAFIR. But I've got chat open on my other window, so please feel free to jump in and ask questions. And if you need clarification or if you want me to slow down, repeat something, just jump in. I'll be paying attention to that. Also, at the end, I'll just open it up to Q&A, and however much time we have left, we can chat about ZAFIR or code or other technical considerations or whatever chat feels like talking about. All right, so let's dive in. Again, I'm Randy Knapp. I'm the creator of ZAFIR tactical role-playing game. ZAFIR was funded on Kickstarter last August and is getting ready for release early this year, or a little bit later this year. And the design of ZAFIR tactical role-playing game was meant to be a love letter to like XCOM and Final Fantasy Tactics in the vein of Dungeons and Dragons. And so you sit around the table with your friends, just like playing D&D, but it's a more tactical, wargamey focus with a lot of real crunchy rules, real crunchy battlefields, that kind of thing. So that's going to come out in a little bit. But one of the things that's just really difficult with making games at all is dealing with how do I take all this information, all this data that I have for uh, making a game, all the rules, all the little pieces of information, and getting them into something presentable without killing myself over every little detail or having to copy and paste a million things or having to work with formats that having to hand format hundreds of pages. And so that's what I want to talk about today, how I solve that problem, because I hate doing tedious stuff like that. A little bit about me. I am a 10-year industry veteran of the video games industry. So my profession, my day job is that I work at Electronic Arts. I work for PopCap Games in Seattle. I'm currently working on the new Plants vs. Zombies game. And so I've been writing code in games for about 10 years. I've shipped such titles as Guild Wars 2 and Halo 5 Guardians, as well as a bunch of little downloadable games on PlayStation and mobile and Xbox. So I've been all over the board and written code for quite a while. So I was really, I've been very blessed that I have that skill to take with me into creating TTRPGs. So let's jump in. Um, Again, just a reminder for people. Today we're raising money for Doctors Without Borders. There's a virtual vendor hall downstairs in the downstairs in the below the video that you can check out. That proceeds will go towards a percentage of proceeds will go towards Doctors Without Borders. So please be sure to check that out, and we can get started. So I want to talk about what goes into making a tabletop role-playing game. And we'll use ZAFIR as an example. So ZAFIR has 33 different classes. It has just about 75 different enemy units. It's got over 200 unique abilities in the game. And all of this has to be organized in a way that is not going to make it extremely tedious or really difficult to actually get the thing creating. So for me, this was Google Documents. Now, I actually started writing ZAFIR in August. No, I'm sorry. Started writing ZAFIR in November of 2018 when my daughter was born. She's sleeping right now, but I had tons of time where I had to hold this baby in my arms while she's sleeping, and I couldn't really do anything else, I began writing ZAFIR on my phone using Google Docs because it would sync between my phone and my computer and all kinds of things. So I actually wrote about 50,000 words or 30,000 words or something in the first couple months of my daughter's life just on Google Docs with my phone. And so I've since been using Google Docs, and that's kind of my ecosystem for storing all the information about ZAFIR that I need. As a video game developer, we talk about what's called a source of truth for our data. This means that there's a single centralized place where the true values live. This is actually a really good example. Let's look at, this is my um, data tables Google sheet. And I've zoomed way in, so hopefully it looks all right on the stream. Let me take a look really quick. Yeah, I think that's like pretty readable. So my goal when creating this document was that this document was the true value. So if I did a play test and I decided a weapon needs to be more powerful or less powerful or whatever, this was the one place that I changed it. Even though I had printed off a weapon reference sheet and had that document somewhere, I knew in my mind that that was just a copy of the real data, and the data that was true, the source of truth was this document right here, this document right here. So, oh, I guess my my video is flipped. This document right there. So this is an example of how I created a source of truth. Now, for you, it might be Excel in a Dropbox. It might be a different kind of document. Maybe it's just a regular document where you've listed things out in a table or in a list where it's just text. For me, one of the great things about using Google Docs um, was the ability to write scripts and access this data in code so that I could do other things. Let me talk a little bit about how the scripts work and an example that I used in order to help me get this done. So this is another of my data tables. This is my word count tracker. This was for myself in a way for me to keep myself on track in writing ZAFIR over the last, I guess it's been about 9-10 months. This is August 28th, 2019. These are all the chapters in my book. And I wrote a script that every day will add a column, count all the words in there, sum them up, and then give me an idea of how much I added or removed over the course of this. So just to give you a little example, this is actually a really big document. This is several months of work, and you can see that I was not always that consistent with getting writing done. Green is days that or documents that had words added, and red is documents that had words removed. And then down here at the bottom, as you can see, where I had just a counter of how much I added per day. So this was a really great day. 20th of November last year, I wrote 2,400 words. And so you can see that writing really ramped up right around here. I was doing lots of writing, lots of writing, lots of writing. And then we got to production. Right around here, I started doing layout and getting it ready for production. So my final word count is almost 156,000 words. And this document helped me get there. So the cool thing about this document was two things. One, I get to kind of collate information from a whole bunch of other documents. And two, I get to show off some of the automated things. So we're going to go over here to the script. This is my whole script that generates that document that we just saw. Each of these is a piece of, it's the document ID for each of those. I don't know if I care too much about this being public. They're restricted, you can't like access them, but I'm not gonna like just spend a lot of time showing off those private document IDs. But essentially every document that you have, so I'm just gonna open up an example document, has an ID, and you can grab this ID up in the top URL from Google's. And so I can grab those documents and then do stuff with them. So I've got some basic stuff here. This code is not that interesting other than that part of what I can do is just gonna grab this open a little more. Part of what I can do is access the spreadsheet app. I can specifically open my word count sheet. I can open every one of my documents using the here we go. Using the document app script from Google. So I open this document, I go through the whole documents text. So this is a way to get the documents text. This is a regular expression, which is complex. What it does is it match whole words, like it skips spaces and stuff and figures out how many words there actually are in the document. And then I just count all those up. And then once I have those in a list in my code, I can output them directly into this thing. So I say, hey, for this day, I'm on this column. And for this particular cell, I know that that is cell number, row number 6 and cell number 5. And so I can insert all that data in there and do all the calculations that way. The other cool thing about this is that this runs automatically every night at 10 p.m. Google, because all this data is stored on Google servers, they'll just spin up an instance of this code and they'll just run it, and it will update my document. And the next morning, I can say, "Oh, hey, I wrote 1,000 words yesterday. I hit my goal," or I didn't write anything yesterday. I feel bad about it a little bit. So this in general is the powerful tools that we can use. So I'm going to go into some specifics around how I created the actual final data that we see in ZAFIR. Before I go, if there's any questions, shoot me a message in chat, and I'll take a break and we'll talk about anything here. So first, let's look at the class abilities. So in ZAFIR, similar to Dungeons and Dragons, you have a character level, and as you level up, you gain new abilities. In ZAFIR, you specifically gain one new ability from your class's ability list every level. Every level you get a new ability, and as you level up, eventually you become a new class and gain a new extended list. And so you generally spend about 5 levels in your class tier before you advance to the next class tier. So for example, and so I want to show first the finished product, what a page from my classes chapter looks like, and then where the data from that came from. So here we go. First, we're going to look at classes. So this is InDesign. If you've ever done any print work, you're probably familiar with InDesign. We're going to take a look at the first page of my base classes chapter, or part of the base class, part of the base classes section of my classes chapter. This is the Acolyte class. The Acolyte has a variety of spiritual abilities. Here is a beautiful art of Tyrain, one of the iconic acolytes from the game, or the iconic acolyte from the game, by one of my artists, Ringlov. Really great art. I love it. But this is in general what you want to see. We've got a section over here on the left. This is a description of the class and kind of what they're about. We've got some suggested builds here of what types of play styles you can do by picking different abilities. And then we have this list of abilities. We actually have 2 pages here. It goes on to the next page, but each of these abilities has a similar style and a similar type of content. So you can see here, animate cover, curse, David claws, discarnate. All of these have this activation line, a type line, an effect line, and then this sort of flavor text down beneath it. So where this comes from is my data tables document. So let's go take a look at that, and we can see exactly where that's coming from. Got a lot of different pages here. Each of these sheets, it's hard to see on the video, but each of these sheets along the bottom is a different section of data. So we're going to first look at abilities. This is the ability list for every ability in the game. I think there are, I hope I didn't lie about how many there were, 208 unique or 207 unique abilities in the game. And I've created a few things in here to help myself. I've got a filter view just for acolytes. So we can look at just the acolytes abilities. So you see here, animate, cover, curse, David clause. Those were our first three things here: animate, cover, curse, David clause. And you can see that all of the information that you see on the final page is present here. We've got our activation symbol, cooldown charges, range, our effect text. So this piece of text defines the rules for playing. And then after the effect text, we've got a whole bunch of information that I use that isn't present. So this says that this ability is used for the acolyte. Some of my abilities are shared between multiple classes. We've got some sort of categorization data I use, and then the actual description. One of the cool things about using Google Sheets for this particular task was I worked with another writer, Paul Dean, to help with some of the ability descriptions. And he was able to work on this document at the same time that I was. So he could be writing the descriptions for several abilities while I was balancing, some of the combat values in the other part of the sheet. That was really valuable. So we can see here, this data translates directly to this data. And it does that through a script. So this script is a little more complicated. It's it's called enemy unit export because I do it for both enemy units and classes, but I also export class data out of here. So this code, export class data, is going to create a database of information from the sheet that I just showed you. It's going to load a template document from elsewhere in my Google Docs. It's going to insert all the right data into that template and then copy that into the final file that I use. So let's first look at the output of this script when I run it. We're going to see this document, starting classes. Let's go look at to where we were. Base classes, acolyte. So this content right here that I've written is exactly this content right here. And then we see all of our proficiencies, starting abilities, suggested builds just the same way. And then we see in Google Docs the same version of that code that got of the abilities that we saw in the final book: animate, cover, curse, David clause, in the same kind of format. So we've got our activation line, our type, our effect, our flavor text, and the name of our ability here. So what happens is, and I'm actually going to share some of this code out after the presentation. I'll send a link to like a Pastebin or a GitHub or something, where you can take a look at the code and try and use it yourself if you're more technically inclined, and you can try it out for yourself. So what this does is, for every sheet in this document, each sheet has a series of headers up at the top. It creates an object for each line where the object's properties are labeled as these headers without spaces. So some of them have spaces in them. If we went back to like enemy units, we've got armor points and shield points here, has a space in them. When we see that in the code, I just pull the spaces out, so it's more proper notation for the code. So back to abilities. What we see here is we create a database from our sheet, class data and abilities data. This is really the sort of workhorse of the code here. All right, back from technical difficulties. Looks like I just had a bit of an internet hiccup, and so we'll pick up where we left off. In this code, what we're going to do is we're going to look through every class that's defined in my class document, and then we're going to look for every ability that is specified for that class, copy that ability's information into the ability template, and then copy that ability template into the class template, and then finally copy that completed class template into the final document. So here's what I'm talking about when I say templates. This is the class template. It looks a little weird because I've got a bunch of styles set in Google so that it translates well into InDesign in the final step. But each one of these objects that I have with the pound sign around them is a um, essentially a variable that I'm going to find and replace in my code with the real information. So you can see here we've got the class description goes here, class proficiencies go here, class starting abilities go here, etc., etc. Excuse me. And you can see that here actually in my classes document, I've got things like proficiencies, upgrade from, upgrade to. So the acolyte upgrades from the seeker and can turn into the warden or the warlock in once you reach the next tier of classes. And so I'm able to copy this information, these fields, directly into class upgraded from, class name, and class upgraded to. And you can see that output here. So the acolyte goes from the seeker, here's its own name, and then it can turn into the warden warlock. Let's go back and look at our code. So I'm going to go through is for each class in order. That's important. This is the order that I wanted them presented in the book. They're like by tier and then alphabetical within that. So for the acolyte, it's going to go through and it's going to essentially go through this whole table full of abilities, find the ones labeled acolyte, and then access its data. Once it has accessed that data, hold on, my screen share thing is right over my my bar here. It's going to put, like the class ability, it's going to copy all this information into this ability template. Each ability is always going to look the same, and I did this on purpose. I wanted it to look the same consistently throughout the book, so you can tell exactly what you're looking at. Oh, this is an ability. It's going to have these kinds of things. So all kinds of information here. I also have some code that removes lines if it's not used. Like, for example, if the ability does not have a utility, which is like a special out of combat use for this ability, then it removes this whole line and you don't see it. So let's go back and look at the code here. This one. So we create our template. And then we start doing this replace text. So what it's going to do, we're going to find this text and we're going to replace it with some text of our own. I have this class entry, and this class entry is that object that I created using the script that turns the data sheet into a database that I can access. This class entry is essentially every line of this document. So you can see I referenced tier here, tier. That is exactly looking up this text from this line of this document. So here I'm just saying, oh, my tier that I'm looking at is I'm checking whether or not I'm starting a new tier. Then once I've created our template, I start copying values over. So let's see if I can find a basic one. So class entry dot proficiencies granted. That means find the proficiencies granted for this class. We're looking at this column. And so it's going to take this text and copy that into the proficiencies element. Now, if anyone's familiar with web programming, the document, the Google Doc is essentially a DOM object, which is document object model, similar to HTML. And so we find elements and we can set properties on those elements. So what we're doing is we're finding the element that contains this text, class proficiencies, in this template here, in this template here, class proficiencies, and we're going to replace it with something. We're going to replace it. We're going to, if, let's see. So this code says, if we don't have any class proficiencies, just replace it with the word none and make it italic. The second one says, insert data using into this template copy, replacing class proficiencies using whatever text is in proficiencies granted. And you'll see that we do that in a lot of places here. Let's use the class description and copy it over. Let's use the suggested build section. Let's use the starting abilities. Let's grab those and pop those in. So that's essentially all of our information that's not abilities we copy in. And then the very last thing that we do is for every single ability that matches, that's this line here, that has our class listed for this ability, create that ability and copy it into the template. So while we're on Acolyte, we go through this whole, I'm going to take my filter off so you can see, so none here. We go through this whole list and we find everywhere where the word Acolyte appears in this column. So there's all kinds of different classes and abilities. And so here's one, Acolyte. Discarnate is one of our abilities. So it goes through this list and finds just the ones for this class. Then it calls this create ability function, which, like the class, opens up, let me see here. I'm really zoomed in. It makes it kind of hard to use. So like the class template, the create ability loads the template and makes a copy of it and then begins replacing parts of it. So we replace the ability name, we replace the activation, we replace its range, cooldown, charges, and effects. All of these are pretty straightforward, except that I do some special things based on whether or not this section is actually set in the document. For example, let's look at Acolyte abilities again. You'll notice the Acolyte ability curse has no charges. And so instead of saying charges 0 on every single ability, when Acolyte abilities don't use charges, I instead write some code that says remove the empty section. So if charges here, what this does is it says, hey, if this text that you give me is empty or 0 or just a dash, then remove this whole section, take the charges out. This one says if the ability doesn't have an effect, then remove the whole line of the effect. I don't think I have any abilities that don't have any effects. I probably did this for something special elsewhere, but that's what that's for. In the same way, we do the same thing for the ability type and requires, and if it has a utility and if it has a description, that flavor text, we just copy all this stuff in and then take that whole template and copy it back into the class. So that's why we see this here. This is the same format we saw in our template, but with all the data copied in. Which finally, once I copy this into, so what I do is I save this down as a file and I insert it into InDesign, and I do a little InDesign magic to fix up the styles, because the styles don't translate exactly, so you got to do a little fixing up, but then you get exactly what I wanted to see here, which was the text ready to be laid out, all in the right style, all with the right individual styles, like the bold and the I don't see any of the italicized, but there's some on some of the other ones. So before I go on, I do want to say again, Doctors Without Borders is a great organization that we're trying to support today. Please take a look at the vendor hall or consider donating, and we can help do some real good in the world as part of CouchCon. Again, thank you to the organizers for having me on. Just want to call out, they've been fantastic. It's been really great to share this kind of stuff with you. I'm really passionate about it. So thanks for letting me share. Any questions before we move on? Go ahead and just shoot them in the chat, and let's go on to the next section. One of the things I did early in the Kickstarter was release a preview of the rules. Now, this was way back in July, and I wanted to give people enough information to run a little tiny campaign of their own. It had a little example, some example missions. It had some example classes, at least class lists. It also had a list of enemy units, about 20 of them. Now, my original enemy unit template, I didn't bring it up. My original enemy unit template looked like this. It was a big table full of stuff that you would fill out, that I filled out. And this was this kind of original design. There was like a list of all the stuff you needed to know, and this has some old information in it even still. But when I had created that preview for people, I did not have any of these scripts in done at all. So I essentially created something like this, except all the text was empty. And I copied and pasted it, and I would like take the copy of my document and I would put it on the side of my screen, and then I would take the other copy of my document. I'm not sure why this is doing what it's doing, but then I would take the other, like my data table, and open it up in one side, and I would literally copy and paste every value over. And you saw that this is not a small amount of value of entries. This is like, 30 odd entries that had to be manually copied over, and it was horrible. And so the thing that I wanted to do was make that process so so much easier. Like it really took me like 6 or 7 hours to just manually copy over all of the information. Actually, that might have been a little exaggeration. Maybe like 3 hours. I don't know. It was way too much time for what I actually wanted to accomplish, which was taking my data and turning it into a document. So that's actually why I started this whole process of getting these scripts going. A question, how much coding experience does one need to utilize authorization like this effectively? I think you meant automation. Uh, so this code is based on JavaScript, and you'd probably need at least a little bit of experience. And if you have experience working with web design using JavaScript and HTML, then you've got enough experience to do this kind of work. Um, you probably don't need to have shipped games or work in, Windows apps or things like that. But having a little bit of web design and web programming experience is probably all you need. You need to understand basic JavaScript flow and functions and loops and all of the sort of basic programming concepts in JavaScript. And then you'll need to have a pretty good understanding of the document object model for HTML. Google has really good documentation. If you go and just look up, this is called Google Scripts documentation. And this app script is actually really good documentation for all kinds of stuff. So you can check out, you edit Gmail, Sheets, all kinds of stuff. This documentation is really good. Hey, let's look at the spreadsheet app and all of the functions that can be called on there. This is all really good information. But you probably do need a little programming experience just to know how to look up the information that you need to get to. I would say that a complete novice, this is going to be a little bit out of reach, which I get is kind of frustrating for people who tend to feel like maybe they have to do the manual copy and paste that I was describing. But you could probably find a friend with some JavaScript knowledge that might be able to help you out. And again, I'm going to think about maybe cleaning up some of the script in a reusable way that might be able to, I might be able to share, so that if you have zero experience, you can just copy and paste, fill in some fields that you need, and then pardon me, I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. I'm gonna just reload my audio. Anyway, I might release it in such a way that other people could use it. Before I move on, am I still sounding funny? Not entirely sure how to fix the audio. Am I still can I still be listened to? Am I still understood? Okay, 1 second. Mic for now. How's this? This is a different mic. How does that sound? Okay, we'll continue with this mic. We're actually this took a little bit longer than I expected. So I'm gonna kind of speed along through the rest of it, just show a couple more examples and then open it up to questions, and we'll call it a day. Great. Are we good to go? Fantastic. Okay. So I was just talking about that there's a lot of good documentation on the scripts, but you do probably need a little experience to get going on that. So let's just look at the finished product here. In my enemy units classes, this is the very first line of my, or very first enemy unit that we have. Again, beautiful art, art by Batwin this time. Great artists, really liked working with them. And you can see it's a really similar style. We've got some information, a description, some stats up here, and then a list of abilities that this enemy uses. I don't have flavor text on these ones. That's not quite as important for these, and I was actually starting to have a pretty big page count once I started laying this out. So we can see here that we've got several enemy units. Each one has a header, some information, some list of attacks, some information, some descriptions, and tactics for each one. We can look through these here. So this is the Aziza Hawk, one of my first designed characters, with art by Oriana Menendez. She was really great to work with. And so this, like the classes, comes from a document that was generated here in my Google Docs. We see the same title as that first monster, all the same information, and again, these abilities. So what that was doing was, in my data tables, all the way to the left, I've messed up the captions. 1 second. All right, I have to change my microphone in my Windows settings. All right, I'm now testing. Hey, there we go. We can now see that. Excellent. Okay. Sorry about all the difficulties, folks. We're almost done here. So we have all of our enemy units, and actually we'll see this first unit that we saw there, the Ishma Deva, which is one of our very powerful enemies. And we see the same concept in our abilities list here again. All of these different columns each represent an object that I can, or part of the object that I can access. This one has a list of all the abilities that this particular monster has. And I have two ways to get abilities here. I've got a set of enemy abilities that are only available to enemy units. And then enemy units can also have abilities that come from my regular class abilities. Like, for example, here we've got a captain. The captain has the ability Rallying Cry, which is an ability that the player characters can get as well. My scripts will automatically look up which database has the right ability, build the template from that, and copy it in. And in the end, we get this, which is very easy to lay out because we've already created all of the text with the right styles and ready to go. I didn't have to manually reset all the styles once I brought it into this document, and I didn't have to do any copying and pasting of individual values to get over to this document. So that being said, I don't think that I have anything more to cover. I want to just open up to any questions about ZAFIR, or about using automation, or about InDesign, or about Google Docs, any of these things. We'll just open it up for like 5 minutes or so, and then we'll go ahead and call it done. Again, thank you so much for having me on. I get that this was a pretty technical presentation, and that some of the details may have been difficult for folks. But I assure you that given a little practice and diving into some of this stuff, it's a skill that can be gained for just about anybody. If this game looks really cool, I just want to call out, I'm just going to post in chat. You can check out the website, ZAFIRgame.com. You can head there. It's the Kickstarter page right now. You can go to see pre-orders. You can see more information about the game, the artists, view more art, and see a lot more cool stuff about ZAFIR there. Pre-orders are still open, so if this is interesting to you, then you can still order a copy, and they'll be shipping probably in early summer. Well, if there are any questions, then I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for joining us today, and for Nova and Samwise for setting this up, and especially to Sarah from Mustang Art for recommending that I come on here. So I hope everyone has a great rest of CouchCon. Thank you so much.